Motion? So hearing none, is there a motion to accept the agenda? Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hanson. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All in favor of the approval of the agenda, say aye. Aye, everybody. I'm not sure, Commissioner Cox, if you can hear us, because we can't hear you. So I don't know if you have your audio on or not, but just checking. Okay. Recognizing Commissioner Keefe. Okay, thank you. Okay, item 2.1 is approval of minutes from the regular commission meeting of February 27th. Any changes?
I need to abstain because I wasn't here, but I just wondered, it says on the notes that I was absent. Could you just add absent with notice to the commission the month before that I would be out of the country?
Okay, that we can definitely do that. That's the change. Shannon, I think the change is that absent, can you repeat that one more time? Absent. Oh, yes, that has to be turned on.
Oh, there we go. Absent with notification to the commission at the prior meeting that I would be out of the country.
Okay. Absent with prior notification. Okay, any other changes?
I move to accept the minutes from the March 26th meeting.
Is there a second? Seconded by Commissioner Keefe. All in favor of the approval of the minutes, say aye. Aye. Okay. Item 3.1 is public forum. As in every meeting, I request, I don't know if there's anyone, oh, yes. So we have at least one person in person, and I just want to make sure if there is anyone on Zoom. I'm not seeing anyone.
There are 2 people with their hands up on Zoom.
Okay, all right, so we'll start with the in-person person first, and then we'll move to the Zoom. So please go ahead and address the commission. Please recognize, say who you are, your name, and then just be cognizant of the time of the commission. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners. Good to be back. I know a lot has changed since the last time that I was here in person, and some of these changes, based on my view as a private citizen, has been going the right trend. However, there are still some deficiencies when it comes to public safety here in our city. But at the same time, I recognize some of the key changes that are happening slowly but surely. Namely, some of the parts where I would love to see, because we're going to be having also new administration that will be incoming in the next few weeks. And so I could very well see some changes happening to that aspect as well. So as an individual, I've been advocating for a trust building process in terms of addressing, and also compassionate way of addressing public safety. Insofar as to say that I remain concerned as a private citizen again, and I do see some of the, rebuilding the police department is concerned, some of the key changes that are happening in that sector. From the equity standpoint, some of the new police officers that are being recruited in order to reflect the citizens of this city and the new incoming American families, as well as the immigrants as well, and migrants and so on and so forth. However, I personally remain concerned to the extent of interactions during response time, as well as during any other engagement. Indeed, the department has hired a public-facing person who do appear during NPA meetings, which I applaud the chief for making that decision to have that individual be there. But I would love to see additional steps taken in order to address the deficiency of the trust building process between minorities as well as the department itself. Some of the key things that I'm looking at is when instances do happen, and minority folks, and I said this, I think, multiple times, not to regurgitate or anything like that. I've said this in the past, when minority folks or folks who are of immigrant backgrounds and so on do want to reach out to for assistance, they're much more likely hesitant to do so just because of the views that they have when it comes to public safety response and the level of interaction that they can get from not just police department, but any other public safety, social services department. So I would like to see, and I know the chief did mention some cookouts that used to happen in the past, and that would kind of sort of like the break the ice moment for members of the community as well as public safety folks. So the amount of time that I've been here in this city, I've seen some positive aspects happening, but I also feel like few things are slowly dragging their feet and not necessarily happening to the extent I would have loved to see it happen. I did have personal experiences as a private citizen on instances that happened recently, and I remain concerned, so to speak, and I would love to see when members of public safety, irrespective of what department they are, from fire to police to Howard Center to social services, for the community members to have a better, much more welcoming interaction. Indeed, there are certain departments that do have certain policies to be followed on how to respond to incidents and how to interact with members of the public. But based on the job that I do as in this city, and just as an individual interacting, building that trust that I've built with members of the community and the conversation that I've had with them directly, gave me a pause on what can be done to genuinely breach the gap of trust, as it were. Because 99.9% when an incident happens, and I ask young adults, why are they not reaching out to social services or fire department or PD, as it were, and they are really hesitant to even address it, to the point where they literally just walk away from you. And I'm not going to go into specifics, but I do remember with one individual whom I do remember PD responded to an incident in the past, and I did ask him, hey, law enforcement is here. Would you like to speak to you about your experience on what happened in the past? And he said, hell no. There's no in hell I'm going to talk to anybody because nobody listens to me. And on top of that, I'm a person of color, and that even puts me in a different category. So I try to assure that individual that, hey, it's not what it seems, and maybe if you spoke, to folks, you might be able to get better assistance. Or reach out to, say, your counselor or somebody who represents within the ward that you live in to help that build that trust between you and public safety department. So, long story short, I remain concerned, frankly speaking, but I do see some changes that are happening in the right directions with respect to opioid crisis, as well as the level of thefts that has been happening in the city. So I see some positive trends that are happening, but I'm also remain concerned. So I just wanted to share that with you. And I'm hoping that as time goes on, before the end of the year, that the chief, Chief Murat, the Chief LaChance, Howard Center, directors, or any social service director will kind of create not a forum, because it becomes very bureaucratic and very formal, and also not a cookout, because it feels more like a feeding time, but something in between, where it's like building the gap, but also at the same time addressing some of the concerns, just like how you do when you're having dinner with your family kind of setup. So I thought I'll just put that out. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your astute observation. Thank you so much. We have two people online who would like to speak. So if you would just say your name and address the commission.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Am I on camera? Because I have a face mask on. I'm not on camera, am I? No, okay. Even though my face mask, I still look good. Okay, so thank you to the police commission. I'm glad to be here. I'm a black girl, so they're trying so hard to make me hate the police, but I just can't. Like, the idea of men and I guess women wanting to protect me just is, I'm into it. It's the vibe for me. And I was the one that told you guys weeks ago, years ago, actually, I should say, to get John Mara because I kept on seeing this man behind El Pozo, and I was like, they should bring him up front. And they finally listened to me. So I'm glad to. Hi, Mr. Murad. How are you? Okay, so my question is that we now have a progressive mayor, which is interesting, and we'll see how that pans out. But I'm really interested in Creamy with a Cop, which is something that Joan presented. Now, I know that Romeo was talking about how, having police officers around is problematic, which I don't understand how it's problematic. First of all, it's better for you to be friendly with a cop than with a public defender. So that's what I always tell my people. And I really think that we should have creamy with the cop. We should be seeing police officers. I am in a group chat of just some of the most prettiest women in Vermont. And we were talking, and I was talking to them about, like, we should be able to name drop police officers. Like, if you bother me, sir, while I'm going to my yoga class in my Lululemons, I will call Officer blah blah blah. I grew up in South Burlington and we had Officer Kevin, who was that very good looking officer, and it was great in times of crisis, at the mall, at the University Mall, to be like, I'm going to call Officer Kevin and things like that. I think people should get in an area where they can name drop police officers, like they name drop the mayor, they name drop other people. And with this whole diversity and inclusion, I'm giving ideas, so write pen and paper, write it down because you will use them. Ideas is, with the whole diversity and inclusion, if these people want to claim that they want diversity and inclusion, then we should be close to our police officers. We should be knowing John Murad by name. He should be reading to the children, just like our lesbian mayor is reading to the children. I mean, why not? So we need to be able to have that relationship, and people should be able to name drop officers. There's no reason why these Burlington high schools right there and the police department is right there, that there can't be buddy buddy with these kids. I mean, why not? And it's, again, tell them it's better for you to be friendly with me than a public defender. And I've been preaching lawfulness. I'm all about lawfulness. And now the governor has sold my idea about how we should be telling everybody that this lawless behavior is absolutely ridiculous, un-American, and is ruining our, the city. So my advice to the commission is try to push petition to our new mayor that we should have criminal with the cop. With that Juneteenth that they spend thousands of dollars on, we should be seeing police officers having chicken like the rest of us, eating with us, sitting with us. And we should be able to have, I need to be able to list 5 police officers in Burlington by hand. I should be like, I'm going to call officer this, officer that if somebody tries me. All I can say now is, I'm going to call John Murad on you. And that does, he is the chief, so it does hit. But, we need to have more people like that. And I'm telling you, that is the secret. That is the key. People need to have slow infiltration of them in our community because they're here to protect us and here to serve us. And why not give them that? I mean, they give up their lives. I mean, women have to deal with their husbands going to Burlington and risking their lives for these men to protect us. I mean, we should honor them. I mean, they're honorable men and women. So I think that we need to start doing that. Again, I've always been right. I told you guys to hire John Murad. I told you guys Del Pozo was a weirdo. I was always right, and I'm right about this. So I think that that should be where the commission is focusing their energy on. Creamy with a Cop is. I would be so there if we have that. Oh my gosh. And we need to also play, John Murad was on TV playing that attractive actor cop. People love cops. Like, I know the media try to make them as these racial killers and all these things. Their history is their history. We're thinking about the future, and the future is a kind relationship with the police. I mean, I'm one to talk. They did falsely arrest me, but we talked about that another time. But still, I won't hate them. Like, I'm not gonna hate the people our society's created to protect me, okay? Just because a couple of them was rogue. So, that's my thing. I'm all for that. I think the commission should try to figure out soul infiltration. I mean, buddy. It's time for buddy systems. It's time for, to see them again on Burlington, walking the streets like they used to back in the day. And we need that because, like I had, I'm in a group chat of really, the selective, the beautiful girls in Burlington, and we're all concerned, and we need to be able to know that when Hot Girl Summer comes up, that we are protected, and we need to be able to list and tell, if a guy comes up to us and we're feeling unsafe, we need to be able to say, we're going to call officer blah blah blah. So I think that we need to start doing that, and the commission needs to start putting their focus on that. And John Mira knows how to hire them because they're looking like real manly men that want to protect. So I'm here for John Mira doing that. I knew he was that guy. I just didn't, you guys had to catch up like always. But that's my thing. That's what I'm here to tell the commission. We need to start pushing that. And, again, if they care about diversity and inclusion, like they allege, then we need to see them at those diversity and inclusion June 19th. June, what they do in June for the Black people,
Okay,
they need
Ms.
to be part of
Sita,
that.
we heard you. Thank you so much for your
You're very welcome.
comments.
Always the
And,
truth, girlfriend. Always the truth.
okay,
Race-
thank you so much. I appreciate it. I think we have one other speaker online.
Hi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, Councilor Grant, we can hear you.
Hey, thank you very much. Trying to figure out how to follow that, but I just sent an email to the chairs of the commission. I don't expect that you have read it. I it was just sent within the last hour. Essentially, what I was trying to do was I was trying to locate the 2023 annual report, and
Can you speak
I
up a
tried to
little
run.
bit, Counselor
Oh,
Grant? Can you speak a little louder?
sure. Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I was just saying that I sent an email to the chairs of the commission. I don't expect that you would have read it by now because it was only sent within the last hour, but I was looking for the 2023 annual report and also the Public Safety Committee met recently and we were reviewing the CNA spreadsheet. And there was some areas that were tagged to the Police Commission that had not been updated in some time. I believe Shannon will be working with you on this, but I'm also available for assistance in terms of updating the document because we're trying to get it fully updated, hopefully by our next public safety committee meeting. That doesn't mean that everything on it has actually been completed, but just so that we have an update in terms of an expectation of a final completion date and the status of where the items are. Um, I also had, in addition, my chat with Shannon, we talked about the ongoing issues for staffing of the police commission. And I want you to let you know that I am talking to some people in the city, starting with the Human Resources Department, to see what we can do. As we all know, Shannon wears a number of hats, looking to see if we can find someone who will be in the meetings with you, operate Zoom, and handle the minutes, as well as some additional tasks that you may need until the position is filled that will include being with you and staffing these meetings. I wanted to say on the chief's report, I appreciate the note regarding the calls of service, but I'm still a little concerned about highlighting 21% when it's calls for service that aren't necessary crimes. So I just wanted to put that out there, but I do appreciate the note. I appreciate the information on what's going on in Pittsburgh. We do know that, has been mentioned numerous times, we are not the only city that has been affected by um, difficulties in the labor market and maintaining staff. I do want to say that we have to continue to work on local solutions to work on building back the morale of our department. The previous speaker talked about Creamy with a Cop. Shannon and I yesterday actually talked about Creamy with a Cop. I would be willing to help raise funds to do that event. I believe we can get a lot of community involvement, but I do want to see other community engagement. As the first speaker spoke about, there is still not a community engagement plan, and that continues to worry me. These issues of trust are not going away, and officers continue to repeatedly say that there is a lack of appreciation, especially in an environment where they're taxed. Our officers are taxed. Our team in the fire department is taxed. So we just have to be really mindful of that. And then the other thing was just an update on digital advertising. I continue to really recommend that the Human Resources Department work with the police department on digital advertising, because I think that can help us with some lateral transfers. But regarding the ad that was placed and the feedback that we got on the ad, I think that's fantastic, and that's great to see that we're recruiting in different ways. That is all that I have right now. The new council is working on committee assignments. I have asked and hope to be continuing on the Public Safety Committee. We'll know that in an official capacity, and then follow up on some other things when that happens. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Councilor Grant. The BPD annual report, I believe, was posted on the police commission, the civic clerk, last year, and I can send you the actual date that it was posted. So it is available already, but I can certainly share that with you. I haven't had a chance to read your email. You are correct about that. So
Yes,
I'll get back to you,
Sure,
definitely.
my apologies.
No, that's fine.
I knew that I just sent it, so I didn't
Yeah,
have
yeah.
the expectation.
No, I'll try to respond to it.
Yep. So
Thank
I'm
you.
not looking for the BPD police report, I'm looking for the police commission's annual report.
Oh, I see. I don't think we have instituted, we did not produce one, I believe, in 2023. I can tell you because I would be the one who would probably produce it. We lost our staff member, I believe, in May 2023, and it has been a heavy lift for the two commissioners to do what we have been tasked to do. So I can certainly put together something quickly, but it'll depend. I think I'll have to talk to the fellow commissioners and see if they can weigh in, and if they have time to help me do that, I'd be happy to put something together. So I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts about that.
Okay, so do you have a, in terms of getting the data for last year, do you know, or have you talk with the data team about when you're going to get that data? Maybe it would make sense at this late juncture to do a report that
Right, I can, you and I can meet, or we can, I'll talk to the other commissioners and see how they feel about that. We have a lot of tasks in front of us, and just to go from one point to another takes an inordinate amount of time. So considering that, I will try to do what I can. I'll get back to you.
Okay, happy to have a meeting about it. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, that concludes our public forum. I assume there's no one else. There were just two speakers.
Correct.
Correct. Okay, thank you, Shannon. Item 4.1 and 4.2, Chief's Report, followed by Departmental Directive DD40 revisions. We will hear from the Chief today about the revisions of DD40. I'm just doing this at one point so we don't have to stop and go. But give commissioners ample time to review the changes and have it back on the agenda, and we can talk about that, whether we want to do it for April meeting or May meeting. I feel like I need a little time. I had only an hour on it, and I think we definitely need a little bit more time for deliberations. Floor is yours, Chief.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I'll start with the Chief's report, and I think Shannon's going to share it via Zoom. Thank you. There's our lovely waterfront. Our first slide talks about the eclipse and where we are, and my eyes are getting worse by the day. So our maximum staffing for the eclipse event is 40. That is what we've got for not only sworn employees, but non-sworn employees available on that day. That's equivalent to what we had last year for the 3rd of July, although it's a little shorter because last year we were able to get 5 law enforcement officers from other departments. We will not be able to do that this year simply because every department is utilizing all of its people. We are, normally in the old days, and Detective Joe Coro is here, the president of the BPOA. In the old days, we would field as many as 60 or 70 officers for the 3rd of July. We'd field even more than that for the marathon, although not all BPD. The marathon routinely would bring in officers and sheriff's deputies from other departments. 40 is what we have. We're pretty confident that if the numbers are what we expect for a 3rd of July, that we will be able to maintain the closed off lanes that we will be using. They're shown in this map. Battery Street into Park Street into the belt will be closed to traffic other than a shuttle bus, emergency vehicles, and the belt will be used for parking. So vehicles will be able to get to the belt, to Vermont 127, and then park on Vermont 127 for a fee, I believe, and then take advantage of a shuttle bus that will be running from there up and down this closed-off lane in order to get people to the waterfront for events. We'll be able to maintain that with the number of officers we have. We'll be able to keep people safe down at the waterfront where the primary location is for official Burlington events. We'll have officers on scene there. Our emergency response unit will be on scene there. And then we will also have a certain number of officers on shift, a sergeant and 4 to cover the rest of the city. And at crowds of up to about 30,000, we should be able to move through the city the way we can on, for example, the 3rd of July. If it gets bigger than, if we end up with more than that, however, we're not certain what we will or will not face. We're not really familiar with crowds larger than that. Even at its height, the pre-pandemic 3rd of July didn't have crowds quite that sized. And the other issue, of course, is that we're not certain how quickly or how all at once people will be moving into or out of the city. The 3rd of July is a little different. They trickle in over the course of the day. North Beach, for example, is usually pretty darn crowded well into the early part of the day, especially if it's a beautiful 3rd of July. For the downtown waterfront, they come in, let's say, starting around 5 o'clock, it really starts to get full. Then they all leave at once. As soon as the fireworks are over, everybody leaves at once. We don't anticipate that being a factor for this. We anticipate people kind of trickling in during the day, and then also once the event itself is over, they will sort of trickle out after that. And people aren't necessarily just going to turn around and say, saw it, and leave. Hopefully there will be additional events to keep them. That will help us spread the traffic out. But should everybody suddenly decide, no, we're done, we saw it, it's cold, it's muddy, and I'm done, having that many people try to leave the city is going to be an experience that we've probably not faced before. The closest thing that we know about is the sort of somewhat infamous Final Fish concert that happened in Coventry, Vermont back in 2004. It wasn't, in fact, their final concert, but you had lots of folks who were great fans of Trey Anastasio and his band, and they were heading up there to see it. They got to the point where it was clear that the interstate was not moving, because you can only get so many people off the interstate exit up there. And as a result, they said, I'm more than, the traffic isn't moving. The concert starts in 45 minutes. I'm still 3-4 miles away from that exit. I can walk that in 45 minutes. I'm just going to put my car on the side of the highway and go. And that's what they did. And then they went to the concert. They were there for the length of it, maybe for periods of time after. And then people, trickled back and took their cars one by one. That is something that we need to be aware of. If we're going to get closer to the 10-day and then the 5-day forecast, and once that 5-day forecast is really clear about what our weather is or is not going to be, we'll have a better picture of whether or not we can expect really large crowds from Boston, from New York City, and what will happen with those crowds. We just don't know. But what I can tell you is that if we are talking 75,000 plus people in the city, we cannot guarantee the traffic grid. And we probably can't even guarantee the emergency lane at that point. And if it's more than that, we probably can't guarantee that emergency vehicles will be able to move through the city. If the city is that blocked. And I've experienced this in New York. There are parts of New York and parts of a day where even lights and sirens cannot get you through the number of cars that are there. And that is going to be a challenge for us, but one that we're going to do the best that we can. There's some really great events planned. Obscura BTV is what BCA is doing. Zach Williamson, who works for BCA, has been just amazing. We've been having meetings about this for months now, and we are prepared to have a day that a lot of people talk about these events as sort of almost life-changing. Once in a lifetime, it's really amazing to see this celestial event occur, and so we're hopeful for that. Next slide, please, Shannon.
No, do people have any questions? I was just kind
Sorry.
of curious to know
Yeah,
if
of
people
course.
have any questions about what's going to happen in the eclipse, if any thoughts. My question was, you don't know if it's going to be, you just don't know about the numbers. It's an unknown. Is that what you're hearing?
Yes, it is.
Statewide?
We know that most hotels are booked out. We know that they've crossed the threshold, I believe, for debooking. For if people find out that it's, it's going to be a totally fogged-in day. That says it's just T-storms and snow expected on April 8th in Vermont. We've crossed that threshold, so there's a certain number that's coming no matter what. The big question that is unresolved is how many are going to come from other places. Montreal is just on the edge of the zone, so I don't think we'll see much from the north. But Boston is well outside of it. New York City is well outside of it. And if those areas, or Connecticut, if the entirety of the New England seaboard decides to come north to Vermont, we're going to be in for it. And we're going to see, if that many people are coming, and you think, for example, that you wake up on Monday and say, I think I'll go up there, and even you're 5-6 hours ahead, you may not make it. There may be traffic jams on the interstates all the way back to certain levels.
And the reason I ask is because, I live on King Street.
Yeah.
And that's something that we have actually been talking about, all our neighbors.
Yeah.
Is what's going to happen between Perkins Pier and up to middle school. That whole area, and we are concerned because, as you know, we are always concerned in that neighborhood for various other reasons, but that we actually met to discuss. And do you have any suggestions for these neighborhood groups? I mean, I was going to talk to King Street Youth Center.
Sure.
And see if they have, any thoughts on any precautions that we can take.
Well, the schools have agreed not to meet that day at all. Initially, they were going to do a half day, and frankly, sending everybody home at noonish on a day like this would have been even worse. So I'm glad that they have chosen to cancel the whole day. I recognize that is a difficulty for some parents. I know that some people are not going to go to work that day, and I certainly don't want to recommend anybody skipping work, and I do not feel comfortable telling businesses what they should or should not think about with regard to staying open or not, the possibility of making some real revenue on a day where we could have lots and lots of people. I certainly think that it's in our best interest to have our service sector at work that day, but can they get in or out is going to be a question. I have questions about whether or not we will be able to get our evening shift in, if it is as crowded and gridlocked as people say. When you're coming from your home, you don't have lights and sirens, and so how are people going to get in? I am going to be instructing folks who are there on the day shift to expect to be held over for a fair amount of time. That said, it could be a fizzle. This could be a Y2K kind of event where everybody thinks it's going to be one thing and it turns out not to be that at all because of weather or because it's just, yes, there are a lot of people, but there are not so many people that we have, literal traffic jams everywhere. I do not know the answer. All I know is that what we've decided to do with regard to closing off certain streets for the sake of making certain that those move, and that we can bring, for example, emergency vehicles from our northern neighbors on that route and get them to the hospital, that we've had a closed-off route for pedestrians to be able to bring them from the hotels and from Church Street down to the waterfront without needing cars. The fact that we put the cars on the belt, not in other places. The reason we shut 127 to anything other than emergency traffic is because we don't have a lot of places in the city where we can park cars in April. For example, North Beach is not a part, you can't put your car there, it will sink. Ditto, where we usually put cars on the waterfront for the 3rd of July. There's a big open field that's right next to Foam Brewer. They're entitled to use that if they want, but I can't imagine that they will. They would have just it would be one big rut and one big mud season. So those kinds of things, we're trying to keep them away from that. But there are other places that are going to be, Shelburne Museum is planning an event, so people may stop there. Maybe 7 gets traffic jammed around that, as it does, for example, when they have a big concert in their bowl. How far back does that go? Does it go all the way to Charlotte? Does it go all the, do we have traffic all the way from our border with South Burlington all the way to the Shelburne Museum? We don't know this yet. We just don't. And my advice to folks who are here is find a place to watch it from here. You're lucky that you live in a city where you will be able to see it. If the King Street Center opens up, I think their roof is available, maybe they are willing. But stay home to the extent that you can. And find places to do that. And the next slide says that much, right? The Vermont Agency of Transportation's advice is basically hunker down, stay in town for your locals, and clear the way, stay another day for your visitors. Like, don't think you're going to come in on Monday morning and leave on Monday night. Plan for trying to figure out a way to stay. That said, that may be easier said than done too, because it's the hotels are taken. Next, please. Thank you. This is our head count. We have not moved in the right direction recently. We had brought in 1 police officer for the February 2024 class, but we have lost some officers as well. We lost an officer an officer resigned to return to Texas, where he was from. I mentioned that to you in a previous meeting. Another officer just resigned to go back to Florida, where he was from. He was a recruit officer. The Texas officer was a lateral officer who had been a police officer before. The recruit officer just found he did not imagine how much paperwork there would be. And this is a complaint among officers around the department. The amount of paperwork we do is pretty incredible. And I think, again, I think that Officer Coro would agree with it, Detective Coro would agree with that. This particular recruit officer, they had a video camera they had video of a person putting stolen items into a backpack. They arrested the man, they took the backpack, they applied for a search warrant for the backpack, and every one of those steps was sort of surprising to him. Although these are the steps that are required by the Fourth Amendment and by our courts. But then once the search warrant for the backpack was granted, every single piece of it everything that was inside had to be taken out and laboriously inventoried and photographed one piece by one piece. It wasn't just dump it out and see whether the thing we're looking for is there. And that too was sort of something that he was just like, I did not understand this. And he'd been a school teacher in Florida. He'd certainly been in professions that had a certain amount of paperwork involved. Just, he did not expect this amount. It was a tough loss though. I think he had the makings of a good police officer. And we have another officer who's not reflected in this, who will be reflected on the April 1st count. Who has left us for UVM. I think he's in the process for a job there. I think the pace in Burlington was a little bit high, and UVM was a little bit slower and more appealing. And then we have another officer who won't be reflected on April 1st, but will be reflected on May 1st, who is a 25-year veteran. I had fully anticipated that departure. We weren't going to keep him forever. He was out at the airport, and 25 years. After 25, basically, you are now paying the city to show up. You are no longer making your pension any larger, and so there's an element that is, why am I still doing this? He is still a loss. He had a tremendous amount of experience. You could always rely on him out there at the airport to know what he was doing. It's a shame. He's already off of the rosters, but he's still on our head count. And this head count talks about anybody we are currently paying, or at any given moment, too. So, for example, that 92 officers that we had on July 1st, 2020, that included one officer who was on terminal leave and one officer who was on long-term injury. And so technically we had 90 at that time effective. The distance between our total head count and our effective head count has grown a lot. I've talked about that before. That growth, the spread has increased because officers are tired. We have more officers out on injury. We have more officers out on military leave. If your military recruiter, not recruiter, but your bosses are saying, hey, would you take this detail? Sometimes they jump at it now when they might not have before. It's an opportunity to get a breather. Next, thank you. What we're doing to try to address this is, we are working to rebuild. I knew that we would have a certain amount of losses. That's always been built into our, at least to my modeling, known and unknown losses. Losses that are tenure based, so I know they're coming, and losses that I just can't know which officer, but someone is not going to make it through an academy class. Someone is going to decide, it's time for me to go at some point. So I've built those in. Nevertheless, we did experience a little bit more than I thought in this most recent couple months, and we also did not get as many in to our academy class as I had hoped. So we're a little bit off the modeling. What are we doing to address that? Well, advertising. Anhad Bajwa, our recruitment coordinator, managed to get us a full-page centerfold ad in Tab in New York City. We are looking heavily to recruit laterals from that region. This is the tabloid. It's not one that I necessarily read myself, but it is the one that everybody down there does. This is what civil servants read on the trains, and it's in the break rooms at the PD, and we had a full page right in the center, and I was very, very excited about that. And we've already gotten nibbles from people, and even a visit from an interested applicant from New York City, so that's great. This is a different picture that says similar to that graphic. This is dictated. This is pegged to the 15th, as always, as opposed to the big graph that shows is always pegged to the 1st. As of the 15th, we have 67 total, and 55 of them are available. Right now, that's actually better, because the 55 available includes a number of officers who were not considered available because they were on FTO. And all of our FTOs, except for one, I believe, have graduated, meaning that they're now solo officers and can be considered available/effective, which is great. The other numbers are the numbers that we have. And so I think right now we're actually at 23 officers on patrol, or maybe even 24, but I think it's 23. Next, please. Incident volume. So, this says very clearly that incidents are not crimes, not automatically, but our incident volume is nevertheless indicative of how often the public calls and wants assistance. The vast majority of incidents are calls for service from the public. Every now and then we create our own. An officer says, I'm going to go do a foot patrol, show me on foot patrol, but I'm also available for calls. That's an incident that's created for that foot patrol. But then if somebody on the marketplace calls and says, Ken's Pizza says, we have a larceny to report, then we're going to go up there, and that's a new incident for that officer. The majority of incidents are calls from the public, and this is indicative that the public is calling us. I think that we are seeing them call us more for one reason, which is that I think they are less likely than they were a year or 2 years ago to think, I don't want to call them because I know they're understaffed and they're overburdened. I think that people are sort of moving past that impulse. However, I don't think they're fully past it, and I think this is still an undercount of calls. I think that it is more calls than we saw in 2019 or 2018 for that matter, but I don't think it's as many as we would see if it were 2018 or 2019, where it never even occurred to people to wonder whether or not to bother calling. People called when they called, and the cops went to every call. And I think that we are still seeing a slight undercount. I just don't think it's as pronounced an undercount as we saw in 2022 or 2023. Next, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you go back to that one, Shannon? Really quickly, I'm sorry. One thing that you'll see there is that, we are still seeing double digits in stacked calls. That is a function of the priority response plan. But we are seeing only single-digit online reporting. And we used to have double-digit online reporting. We have really curtailed the number of online reports significantly. Cut it in half, as a matter of fact. Next, please. The priority response plan, this is a grounding slide. It's in every document just so that so people can see and understand which ones go and which ones don't go, either to priority 1 or priority 2. This is the Pittsburgh slide that Councilor Grant mentioned in the public comment. So, it's true that we are not the only city that has experienced a headcount decrease, but I think that for me, the point of these numbers is that our numbers are far, far worse by percentage and by ratio than Pittsburgh's, or Austin, Texas, which also had to create a priority response model, or any number of other cities that have had to do it. I do not like that priority response model. I know the public doesn't like the priority response model. I know that it is a frustrating thing. I can't wait to get rid of it. I don't imagine that we can until we get very close to 80, if not 80 or above. But maybe high 70s is a possibility. The officers don't like it. But when you look at our numbers versus Pittsburgh's, and you think that Pittsburgh is doing this, and in some ways in a more absolutist kind of way than ours was, I think it says something. Theirs is we just won't go at all. Ours is we'll go until we don't have enough officers on the shift available to go, and then we move to the model. And we're doing that with very different numbers. Now, again, it's hard to make these comparisons. Pittsburgh has, 300,000 people, and we do not. And our size makes a lot of comparison challenging because we are in many ways a big city, and in many ways we are not. You get into some of the inadequacy of small numbers when you're trying to compare. But next, please. Selected Valcor incidents for the year. It's worth noting that very few of these are up 23% over last year, and that does cause pause. Where is the increase coming from if it's not from these? Well, I think the increase is coming from, you see a couple things. Larceny, unfortunately, is up. But you see, assault simple is up by 1. That hardly counts. Assault aggravated is up quite a bit over last year's at this point. But what is it that's causing a 23% increase? It is calls for service that don't necessarily translate into these kinds of categories, most of which are more serious incidents. The reason we've been tracking these here for 2 or 3 years now is so that we can see a through line of these incidents that are generally more impactful on the community. Mental health issues are something that are impactful. Aggregated larceny is something. Obviously, the big crimes, what the FBI would call the major crimes, or the 7 major crimes: robbery and sexual assault and aggravated assault and homicide. Those are things we track. I don't track homicide on this. It's not worth tracking a category that is that small and doesn't necessarily tell us a lot, although 2022 definitely made me rethink that. Our gunfire is worse this year at this point in the year than it was even in 2022, which was the worst year. And yet I can't tell you exactly why. The nature of the 3 incidents that had occurred as of March 15th are less concerning to me than the trends that we saw in 2021 and that continued into 2022. I don't see this being a huge year for gunfire, even though right now it appears like it would, if at this very early stage, it would look like it's about to be worse. I don't see that, nor do I see, overdoses are down. They're still way too high, but they're down from last year's numbers. I don't see us seeing the same degree of overdose that we saw last year. I see the big challenge for our community this year as houselessness and the attendant issues that surround houselessness. It's not a crime to be homeless, but people who are homeless do tend to find themselves committing certain kinds of crimes: open-air drug use, certain kinds of theft, and that is something that we're going to see continue this year. I don't see a solution to that anytime soon.
Why are you not concerned about that gunfire number?
Because I think that what we're seeing right now is not. We made arrests in those cases. 1 or 2 of them were sort of accidental / they were not shootings per se. But this actually does not. I don't believe this captures the attempted murder that happened right out on Main Street, where that young man was shot another young man, and also then was inexplicably released on conditions for the weekend. That is not captured by this. Those crimes are still with us, and there is a possibility that it could go in that direction. But we've made very important arrests of the people that were driving gunfire in the previous years. That's why we saw a decrease from 2022 to 2023, and that's why I still feel that general fact is going to dictate where 2024 goes overall. And so I don't, at this early stage, that is not concerning me. Not to say that I don't take it seriously. Not to say that we don't have the officers. The detective team comes in and works 24 hours straight to get an arrest and get a case. They hit again, each of the incidents that's resulted in a person being struck this year has had arrests made with it. The only thing, and actually I think all 4 of the incidents thus far have had arrests made. And that makes a difference too. But I can't otherwise explain why I'm not at this moment.
Yeah, because I'm just
thinking
looking
that's my
at
biggest
it, and
priority.
that's just from a very statistical perspective. It appears to me, oh my
Yeah.
God, what's next, right?
Yeah.
But no, you explained it very well. You actually explained that there's a backstory to this, which is that these gunfires don't happen contextless, that there is a history behind. And I think,
Yeah.
am I understanding you correctly?
Yes.
That you have been
Yes, you are.
able to trace it back to certain elements.
Yes.
Okay, yes, understood.
Priority 1 incidents, you'll see it's a little lower than it was in 23 at this stage, but it's right in there. You really can't see any deviation yet. It's a little bit too early to tell where it's going to go. But we did see increases over the years. And now, next, yes, thanks, Shannon. So this slide, if you get the PDF online, each one of those terms, St. Paul Street and Walnut Street and North Champlain Street, those lead to links that will take you to the press releases about those specific incidents, as will the money laundering and the hundreds of thousands of dollars seized and the multiple firearms recovered. We are seeing a real change in overdose right now. That is good news. The trend right now is that it will be lower than 2023, which was absolutely unconscionable, the height of 2023. It may, right now, even be lower. It's quite possible that it's not going to experience the huge uptick that you saw in 2022, which coincided somewhat with the first phase of the hotel program ending. And I believe a large number of people coming into Burlington and from, not from out of the state, but from other parts of Vermont into Burlington at the end of the hotel program, and then beginning to use drugs in the open. And it also coincides with, as this slide talks about, the introduction of something that was called the New Philly Dope. And that was shown to be in early 2022 to be primarily or significantly xylazine or trank, as it's called in the streets. That caused a uptick in overdose because it is a particularly vicious drug. It also creates symptoms that are far more noticeable to passerby as troubling and problematic and cause people to call for emergency response more often. Unfortunately, we don't see, heroin is harder to get these days because there's too much, it's all fentanyl, and for a while it was largely xylazine. I think we've significantly disrupted the amount of xylazine in the system. That doesn't mean that it can't return, but the drug unit in particular has done really great work. Large-scale seizures, tens of thousands of bags and bags of fentanyl, et cetera. And what we saw with regard to heroin creates an overdose that, unless it's a person that actually overdoses, falls down and begins to have difficulty breathing and getting oxygen, that's the extreme. The use of it doesn't necessarily flag people. It's somebody just nodding off on a park bench. Somebody might say, that guy doesn't look good, but they might not call it in either. Xylazine tended to cause overdoses that made people very upset to witness them, and we ended up with a lot of calls. I believe that 2024 is not going to be what we saw in 2023 with regard to drugs. In the same way that I do believe, the numbers aside right now, that 2024 is not going to be what we saw in 2022 with regard to gunfire.
There are lots of, I hate to say this, but a lot of TikTok videos that police officers in New York are now documenting just to understand the impact of xylazine. Just that's the only way.
Yeah.
And I've been sort of watching some of those just to understand how people act on it. And I think you may have recently heard of cases where people are on xylazine and they cannot control themselves. And they're either pushing other people into, it's just,
Yep.
it seems it's creating almost, recreating almost psychotic episodes in people. So it is very scary, not only for police officers, but also for the community.
I think in general, both xylazine and also meth tend to create more erratic behavior in users than just heroin or even fentanyl heroin. That said, you know, I don't think any of these is necessarily something that creates, you know, the sort of, I think there's stories out there of people on PCP, for example, or things, people who can't be stopped in various ways. And we certainly saw, I remember in New York, that was something that, there was a product called K2. It was also called synthetic marijuana. There were stories of, I remember a very horrific story of a guy who, when ESU attempted to enter his apartment using a Sawzall to get through the door, he was barricaded inside with somebody. He gripped the Sawzall blade as it came through the door. Those stories, they do exist. They're out there. I don't think that that is indicative of the vast majority of people who use these substances. I think
I did say TikTok.
No, I know. And who knows what TikTok is or isn't trying to sell us, if you believe those, you know, potential conspiracies too. But I think, you know, the vast majority of these people are suffering in terrible, terrible ways. And the big thing that we saw with xylazine wasn't necessarily different kinds of behavior, but horrible wounds, horrible, you know, things that needed to be treated in ways that drugs in and of themselves alone, which are bad enough, don't need to be treated. And that's really what our takeaway has been. Although I certainly would defer to Joe. Do you want to come and say anything, Joe, about this particular topic? Yeah, come on. I know you're not here for that, but Joe is a detective in the drug unit and is going to know more than I and may contradict some of what I've just said, which would be fine by me because it's more accurate information.
No, I think. There we go. No, I think the chief was pretty on point with what he was talking about. Related to tranq or xylazine, it's mostly what you see is the person, you know, either they're, a lot of times the videos you'll see is people hanging over. They'll be standing up, but they'll be completely bent over and just kind of standing there. You can't really talk to them. They're kind of out of it. That's mostly what you see, and then the sores are the big part. And then actually detoxing from xylazine, after a lot of those sores have gone away, they then get sores in places unexpectedly that will come back as the xylazine's leaving the body for good. So it's a very difficult thing to see, and it's very hard on people's bodies. But the good news is if they actually are able to get off xylazine, that they can completely recover from it over time. It does take a while. And we've seen a lot of it in the last, you know, year and a half, 2 years, and it's, from what we can see firsthand, it's definitely, I wouldn't say gone, but it's very close to gone. So I think at this point it's slightly going to be in a lot of the fentanyl.
Is xylazine an opiate?
It's actually a tranquilizer, a veterinary tranquilizer.
So, does xylazine get people addicted, or is it the underlying fentanyl or opiate?
So xylazine itself is a little bit, is very addictive. The actual, the issue is after you've taken it, similar to like fentanyl or heroin, coming off of it is so terrible that most people just would rather stay on it because they don't want to experience the detoxing effects of it. So that's usually why everybody that I've spoken with about it, their personal experiences, why they take so long to get off of it is because it's so awful to get off of.
Thank you.
I think if I can add,
Commissioner Garrison, go ahead.
yeah, I think if I can add, you know, with the work I'm doing, I'm also seeing a lot of people.
Can you speak up?
Oh, yeah, sure. I'll get closer. I said, with the work that I'm doing, I'm also seeing a lot of people, you know, getting treatment now, which is great. And I do see this drug trend, you know, being less than what it was last year by far. So, you know, it's good work from the police station, you know, the work they're doing behind the scenes. So, yeah, I just wanted to add that in there.
So did I hear both Detective Coro and you say that it's xylazine has, even though we are concerned about it, there is a decline, did you say? Okay.
They're also seeing right now sources that we can't necessarily share publicly, but there appears to be less of it in the system of people, for example, who have to test for whatever reasons, treatment courts or other kinds of things. There seems to be less, and that's a good thing. Doesn't mean that it can't return. much of it up here was coming from trafficking organizations that our team had a remarkable amount of success in tackling. We don't get long-term arrests, or excuse me, incarceration from some of those, the feds do, but a lot of times they get released, after the arrest, but then they don't come back necessarily for a bit. But somebody fills that gap eventually, right? That has been the nature of the of law enforcement's sort of battle with drugs for quite some time. Somebody fills the gap. The hope is that at least maybe this particular product is not going to continue to be something people seek. Like that the market forces will actually create an absence of this particular product. And fentanyl's bad in its own way, but at least I would say that people would take fentanyl over this xylazine most days. It's just much less awful for the body, even though it's awful itself. So, any questions about the chief's report? Or, yeah.
This isn't about the chief's report, but I had a question. That everyone on the police commission and city council and 800 other people received this very threatening, scary email. And I'm just wondering, I'm sure that you all looked into it or knew not to or whatever, but I'm wondering if there is would we expect normally to get a response from the police to say, checked it out, it's all good?
That's a terrific question. I actually didn't receive it directly. I wasn't on that list. I ended up getting it. It was forwarded to me by Council President Paul. The Vermont Intelligence Center had published something about emails like that the day before and the week before, and therefore we had reason to believe that it was not as frightening as it sounded. We did liaise with the people who were directly mentioned in it, and were able to make certain that they were safe and that they felt that they had been, that all precautions had been taken. But ultimately, I think that was something, it went to media as well, but we didn't make it into I feel there are times where you are giving someone what they want if you make a story out of something like that. And I don't want to.
No, and I completely respect that because, and I actually have to say that I respected the media. This is also about media ethics, which is, there is, sometimes these stories can be more about, what we call in media, no notoriety.
Right.
And I think that's a good way of doing it. But I think what the commission would have liked to see, maybe just a one-line email from you saying, hey, this is, don't worry, ignore it. Okay.
That's a great point. And no, I did not. I did give such an email to a couple of counselors who had reached out to me directly and with whom I spoke. But you're correct that I didn't take it on myself to recreate the list that had been given and then sort of hit the equivalent of a reply all. It's also clear that there were larger lists than even those, right? So the one on which your names were, there were others that, because I had inquiries about it from people who weren't on that list, the one that I got. The one that was forwarded to me had, 15 names or 30 names or however many. There were others out there that were getting it as well, and I don't know. So I wouldn't have been able to get to everybody.
The one we received had 183 names.
Was it that many?
I think, am I correct?
You should feel kind of left out.
I do. I think my name was there with a burlingtonvt.gov address, and that is not our email address. Our email system is separate. So the fact that we're bpdvt.org is why we didn't get them. But I saw a couple employees' names there. I think it was a stripped list of city employees and people with city emails, and it was just sort of cut and pasted in. So, but you're correct. I should have sent something.
I would say to the commission and the city councilors and the mayor. I think that would be like the basic.
Sure.
And and not even to anybody else, I think
So the council and the mayor, obviously, I did. I did not to the commission, and I apologize for that.
Okay, no, that's, any, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No.
DD 40.
Yeah, I'll move to DD40. So DD40. DD40 is our Department Directive 40, and it covers it covers internal investigations and citizen complaints, and it is online. It's available online as it currently exists. The current version, I think, is about 7 pages long. It was signed by then Chief of Police Michael Sherling, so it's got some miles on it. It was flagged by the CNA organization as something that was in significant need of rewrite and review. And it frankly does not capture how we conduct any of those things at this stage. It is not what we do. We are largely guided by, I think the most significant piece of guidance for how we take in complaints and then deal with them is our agreement with the Police Commission from August of 2020. Another significant piece is an executive order that was promulgated by Mayor Weinberger in September of 2020. We have a body-worn camera policy that was agreed to by the Police Commission and the department in August of 2021. We have changes that have been made to how we proceed with internal investigations because of these. We now make every single complaint, it goes directly, not every single, the vast majority of citizen complaints come through the complaint portal online, and those go to you at the exact same time as they come to the police department. So the notification is instantaneous. Anything that comes to us in another manner is sent by the Deputy Chief of Administration easily within 5 business days, usually much faster than that, to Commissioner Keefe. And so all of those things are changes. We no longer wait till our meetings to review these things. They're shared with you much more quickly than that. For certain incidents, there's body camera made available to all of you immediately. And so all of those changes had happened. And frankly, I did have a discussion with Josh Diamond, who's doing a lot of the work for the joint committee of the Charter Change Committee and the Ordinance Committee that was reviewing our disciplinary processes in the charter. And one of the points that he made to me that resonated was the fact that, yeah, you guys are doing a lot better than you used to. You're doing much more than you used to. You're doing many innovative things that are far and away different than and better than other agencies in our region and even nationally, but it's not all in one place. And so I said, okay, let's put it in one place. And this document, which is 30 pages and not 7, is indicative of the difference of what we are doing. I have not changed much from DD7. What I've done with regard, excuse me, not DD7, DD40, the existing DD40, I've moved around a lot of parts of it because it's not in sequence to what we do anymore. I've changed some titles. We don't have what's called an Office of Quality Control in DD40. It's not what we have. Nobody really remembers that term at all, to be honest. That was a point of contention that I had, not contention, but a point of edification that I had with Deputy Chief Matt Sullivan, 4 years ago when Sully was promoted to Deputy Chief. He's like, we don't even have this. I don't know what this is talking about. Okay, it works this way. So this document spells that out. It incorporates all of the pieces that are in the agreement with the Police Commission. It incorporates many of the points that were made in the CNA report around DD40 and investigations, internal investigations, and citizen complaints in general. It's a full-on update. It identifies new means for citizens to file complaints. It talks about how an internal affairs section work. It does not detail a specific internal affairs. That was a point of contention I had with CNA and raised it in my review of their materials, which I presented to them and made public. And their response was, that's your problem. I basically said, who is supposed to be a dedicated internal affairs team in an agency that doesn't have enough people to do what it's doing? And they said, that's your problem. And I said, okay, well, we can have officers who are specially trained in it, and all lieutenants are. They go to IA school. Certainly, Deputy Chief Labarge is one of the best investigators and sort of investigative supervisors I've ever seen at work. And Deputy Chief Labreck has been to IA school. Our lieutenants have been to IA school. So for more serious matters, that's what we're going to do. We're going to use them. Would it be better to have an entirely dedicated team? Sure, but that is a very big department that can do that, right? IAB is the Internal Affairs Bureau in the New York City Police Department. It is a separate part of the police department. It's got its own 3-star chief. It's got its own inspectors and captains and lieutenants, but it's handling a 36,000 person agency, actually 55,000 person once you count all of the professional employees as well as sworn employees. We don't have that, and nor do we have the volume. You'd have somebody sitting around a lot and not doing that kind of work. I know that it's a lot of work for you to keep up with Commissioner Keefe. I'm amazed that you do all, to track all these things. But even so, I think you'd acknowledge that that's not a full-time, what you're doing is more than you should have to do, and it's more than a public servant, who, a voluntary public servant should have to be doing, but it's not a full-time job if it were a person. I don't believe you'd say that, and forgive me if I'm speaking for you. And we wouldn't have a full-time job for a person conducting internal investigations either. So that notion I don't particularly agree with, but I do agree with, the idea of revising the policies so that all complaints are documented, including those that we would call invalid, creating a policy that directs that complaints are handed by the first line and which ones go to first line supervisors and which ones go to higher level supervisors. This policy does that. This new draft does that. This new policy very clearly delineates the nature of how these investigations work. And it wasn't just the CNA document that I looked at. I looked very, very closely at your documents around your response to the charter change. And not just the official one that you were posted, but there were a number that you shared with me, and I'm grateful for that talked about, individual commissioners' thoughts about different kinds of things. And, some of the things that were mentioned in there are definitely present in here. Strengthens the Commission's monitoring role, helping to improve police performance and public safety. I think if you look at Section 8, page 12, you'll see exactly that. And, specifically it says that it creates a very specific role for the Police Commission. In Section 8, at the very beginning, it says, the chief of police must share a recommendation for discipline with the police commission prior to finalizing that discipline. That is that role of strengthening the monitoring role. IX section 9, page 15 is an entire section about the Board of Police Commissioners, which doesn't exist in the current DD40. And it basically reiterates what's in the agreement from August 2020. And that also is included as an appendix, the agreement itself. There is a request for, allegations of Category B misconduct against the chief. There is now a section of this in 9F on page 17 that explicitly spells out what happens when the chief is the one being accused of misconduct and how the police commission takes that on. It explicitly talks about Act 56 and our obligations to report up the chain to the state with regard to licensing, et cetera. One of the things that is not in the charter change response document that's posted online, but was a part of the documents you provided for me, was a request for a mapping process. One thing that was said is we really need to map what we're doing now. This new draft of DD40 is a map. It is a roadmap. It's a complex one, but it actually includes in Appendix 3 on page 24, it has an honest-to-gosh map. It's got a flow chart that really does show exactly what it is that we're doing and is indicative of, like, you want to see the process? Right there. There you can see it. Ditto transparency, sharing with the public. This includes in Section 6G and H on page 10, plans for just that, for both a data documentation, a statistical summary that is in G, and public transparency of following the model of the Vermont State Police and talking about every BIA, so every internal investigation. And we wouldn't call them BIAs anymore. We would simply call them internal investigations. BIA used to stand for sort of Bureau of Internal Affairs, but it was, why do you call the investigation by the name of the entity conducting it? So it's an internal. And the notion here is that you have supervisory reviews for lower level things that can be looked at by any supervisor, sergeant, or lieutenant. Then you have administrative reviews, which are more elaborate. And if what transitions it is, do we need to interview officers and give them noticed interviews and observe their garrity rights? then it needs to be an administrative investigation, an administrative review, rather. An administrative review, not a supervisor review. And it must be conducted by a lieutenant. Does it show a pattern of certain kinds of crimes? Does it show, or not crimes, but allegations? Does it say that there is, a serious allegation in here? Like this is a significant use of force allegation or a significant, abuse of authority allegation. All right, well, transition it out of supervisor review into administrative review. And if you then get to the point where, no, it's likely that there's going to be significant discipline out of this. I'm looking at this and I'm seeing that there's enough smoke here that I'm pretty certain I'm going to find fire, and there's very likely to be serious discipline or the possibility of that discipline, then you transition to internal investigation. And there's stipulations here for what happens if you say, no, there's strong evidence of a crime here. And that shouldn't be us. This should be the Vermont State Police or the Attorney General's office or the State's Attorney's office, and how we do that. But it also talks about how you can dial things down as well. Because if you get to the stage where something has been investigated by an external party, for example, and found to have no policy violation and no legal violation, why would that remain an internal investigation in the department? If credible entities have done that review, you can dial that back down to something different, a different kind of review. For example, in a use of force, we review every single use of force. And it's looked at, it's got a multi-layer review, but if there's improprieties discovered, then it transitions to something else. But if those improprieties are dispelled by a third party, before you even really begin the use of force review, why would you maintain it as an internal investigation? It's now a use of force review, and we're going to look at it the way we look at any. So those are some of the things that are in there. I knew when I gave it to you guys about, I think it was more than a week ago, but it wasn't. I said I didn't like throw it at you the night before the session, but I knew darn well that this was a lot, and I didn't expect for a vote. But I'm hopeful that we can get one, because I think that signing off on this and having this be our definitive new policy, all it would largely do is codify where we are. Now, I shared it with the union. The union did not weigh in on it with regard to opinions and ideas, and that's going to be part of the next stage as well, before having it be signed off on. But I did share it with them and make certain that they looked at it and could review it, et cetera. And I am confident that what this does is codify what we're currently doing. So.
I just have a couple questions. And I definitely need more time with this. And a couple that just jumped out at me. They're kind of picayune, but on page 3, under lower level infractions, one of D is improper care and maintenance of equipment, and we changed DD01 recently to make clear that failing to maintain custody and control of weapons, criminal justice information systems, or encrypted technology may also constitute a violation of Rule 18, neglect of duty. And I know they don't have to line up completely, but I just wondered, and I know that this is prefaced with include but not limited to, and these are just examples, but I wonder if in 2D, where it says neglect of duty, we might, just to be extra clear that everyone knows what we're talking about here, that we might want to add a D3, which is which aligns with DD01.
Oh, that'd be great. That's a great idea.
The other comment is,
although this section here is taken directly from the CBA. So from the collective bargaining agreement that we have with the Burlington Police Officers Association. So F infractions lines up literally with that.
Okay, maybe it causes problems then, but I just want to point out that we just made that change. The other one is a little bit more, maybe just want to think about, I don't know where this language came from, maybe it exists someplace else, but I think we need to be a little careful about how we say this, where an invalid complaint includes complaints that are clearly related to a complainant's mental health and are indicative of a delusion or fantasy. I just want to make sure that we're not saying that people that have that are suffering from a mental health issue or even delusions and fantasy don't also have some valid complaints. And I want to make sure that we can tease that out and say it in a way that maybe it's not even necessary to even include this phrase in there, but I wouldn't want someone who is delusional because of their illness, who also has a valid complaint, to not have their complaint be considered valid.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't want that either. And I think, I mean, we deal with people who have chronic mental health issues all the time, and we do take complaints from them. But I don't believe that it's fair to officers to take a complaint when somebody says that the officer's radio waves inside my head have caused me to go pee in the hall, which we've seen. Right. We've seen those exact complaints.
I get that, and I just think that maybe think about maybe there's another way of saying this so that
Sure.
so that it's not, you wouldn't read it and think that you're just going to dismiss people's complaints, or maybe it's
Sure.
fine, but that occurred to me.
Right,
when read it.
I'm with Commissioner Oski on this one, can we have a language that's less stigmatized? I think, maybe, you and I can talk about, like, giving you some ideas about that.
I'd love some ideas for that.
Rather than,
language.
because, my first reaction when we were talking is that we have been receiving emails from people, quite a few emails, sort of just describing whatever BPD has been, putting all kinds of things in their head and all that stuff. So how do we balance that? Here is somebody who's clearly delusional or has some challenges.
Yeah.
So how do we balance that with the language?
I mean, I think that and are indicative of delusion or fantasy was the key for me. But if that is language that is troubling to you, and if there are different suggestions for how to improve that, I'm all ears.
Did that come from someplace else, or was that new?
No, I believe that's new
Okay.
and in line with how we have been treating such kinds of complaints.
Yeah, I totally get it. I just
Yeah.
want to make sure that we're
No,
being
that's
clear.
not from, for example, from a CBA. So from the CBA, we can't, that language is language that should remain, we don't have to use it in here, but we can't change, I would recommend at least, that we not change that language because it is part of the CBA. The language that is directly from the existing DD 40, we can have at that as long as we agree to it. I tried to change as little of it as possible in order to minimize the need for anybody to have arguments about it or concerns about it. But we can change it, and it in fact is this body's authority to approve, recommend and approve those changes. But anyway, yeah, so this particular did not come from either the CBA or the existing DD 40.
Thank you. Just first, I think one of the overarching recommendations from CNA was a whole rewrite of DD 40, and we'd like to commend the department and yourself and your team. It is certainly an entire rewrite and a very, very comprehensive. Thank you for clarifying the point on the recommendation that a separate bureau within the department be created. I think that explanation makes sense. I think one of the things, just a little more time for our side, would be just to line up with the CNA recommendations and what was done. One of the ones that I recall, and maybe you could speak to this, was I think they had concern that the chief was both sort of the gatekeeper, the intake for complaints, as well as the adjudicator. How has that been addressed in the current draft?
So I don't remember that phrasing being part of it. I know that there was if that exists in the report, it may be in the text of the report, but it's not in the specific recommendations. Shannon provided those specific recommendations to me, and there wasn't anything to that effect, like saying that the intake shouldn't be the same as the final report. That is something that we could contemplate, that the emails that don't come to me, but instead go only to the Deputy Chief of Administration or Deputy Chief of Operations, and then the members of the commission who do receive it. I think is it just you, Chair, or is it you and Commissioner Keefe? To take the Chief of Police off those emails, that's possible. I don't know what necessarily would be certain. They're going to show it to me, very shortly anyway. But I suppose that if it, for example, if it was about me, I guess there would be an opportunity that that's a problem that I'm also receiving it. But I would eventually probably receive it anyway. I don't know.
It's possible for the commission to have a special meeting around this if we need to. I mean, I can
No,
pull.
I mean,
okay.
it was just something that I can send in an email, and I know I saw it.
I'm very happy to forward the piece that Shannon sent me that has all the, I mean, I'm looking at the printout here, that is all the specific recommendations. And again, that's different from text inside. And obviously, they're going to be more expansive. That is, the authors of the CNA report are going to be more expansive in the paragraph text sections than they are necessarily in the numerical recommendations. But in the numerical recommendations, I don't see anything like that. And I didn't review all of the text as I was doing this. I reviewed the numerical recommendations.
And anyway, we don't have time to get hung up on the detail. Again, we could address that in the next round of discussions. I think one of the, and it's on the agenda for later, at this point, I think there are some existential questions about the role of the commission in regards to the charter change. So I was just wondering the extent to which, would it be, having a sense some things may change. I think the complaints policy from 2020 could be streamlined somewhat in practice. And that's something that I think may come out of these discussions. So I'm just wondering the extent to which those pieces that have been sort of incorporated into this, I don't think we want to slow down the process. I'll get more to the point. For example, the discussions, the briefings, we've been trying to work more through written communication as opposed to briefings and executive session. I think what I've seen in practice over the last year and a half is we need to keep pace with the department. The department is doing thorough investigations really in a timely manner. We don't want to slow that process down. For example, in a more serious case, I think Detective Coro raised this at the December 26th meeting. You have officers waiting for a disposition. If there's a requirement that you have to brief the commission verbally, and there isn't a quorum, and this thing slips because the executive session needs to be rescheduled, is that really working in the best interest of all? So I don't have the answers, and clearly we want to talk about that. But just to raise the point that if some of these things, again, the role of the commission is being discussed through charter change, there are some things in practice that I think we've seen, and perhaps we could have a discussion with DC Labarge on how we could keep that more streamlined. That may be reflected in some of the implementing procedures of the policy. So just putting it out there that I would not want to hold up getting DD40 voted on, because I think it has some really important, significant reforms. But if there's some pieces about what the commission is doing in its review, that may need change, but we also don't want to put a clog in the process. So I'm just putting it out there. And just for consideration. Or maybe there's a way that we could, say perhaps some of the commission's procedures are going to be revised in consultation with the department, and maybe just put a caveat that I feel they're largely standalone anyway, and I don't think they really get to the real core of the reforms that you've put in already. So just putting it out there.
That's terrific. As I said, on page 12 at the very bottom, it talks about in certain instances of discipline described in 9C2, the chief of police must share a recommendation for discipline with the police commission prior to finalizing that discipline. And then if you look at 9 and C2, this is from the agreement, and what it talks about is, higher level complaints that are likely to any conduct for which suspension or termination is recommended. And so that's not, you know, that's not a lot. That's pretty serious. Even the cases that you all have seen that have been brought to you in the appeals process have mostly been about written reprimand, not suspension or termination. Now, we get those too, and there have been officers terminated. That's not a fun part of anybody's job, but there have been both officers and employees terminated. And, you know, if it was disciplinary, we've brought that to you as well. But that must requirement is a relatively, you know, it's a relatively narrow set of circumstances.
Just going back to what Commissioner Keefe is saying, and I think Commissioner Cox just texted me about this too, the 14-day, I think somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Again, that time frame from, I think that's something the commission also has to kind of deliberate on as well. Because sometimes we don't have enough people, we can't even have a quorum within 14 days. And to keep the officers hanging meanwhile, because we can't get a quorum, seems somewhat problematic to me. I think sometime, I think we have to look at this time frame and decide how far we want to go and how, is that making sense, Commissioner Keefe?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's less a question of there's a deficiency in DD40, it's just the extent to which we don't want to be a delay in the process. So it's maintaining that transparency and accountability, having those reviews, but having those reviews done in a way that's not, you know, hamstringing the department's investigation and its desire to have a timely adjudication of these complaints. So.
Yeah.
I had a couple of questions. First, I just wanted to thank you for doing this rewrite. It's really thorough, and I love that. Sorry? Oh, sorry. I love that you have, I don't like talking in a microphone, but okay. I love that you've pulled together all the documents that were out there and put them in one place. I think that was one of my concerns with the charter change when it came up, was that there didn't seem to be a lot of understanding about how things currently worked. And I feel like this document helps to clarify that. And if I'm reading it correctly, it sounds like it lays out the whole process up to the point, and this is how I read it, so please, Chief, tell me if this is incorrect. The concept that we spent a lot of time talking about with the charter change about an independent panel, the place that I would see that coming in would be when you go through, and I don't have the page references for you, the process where you have made a recommendation to the commission and the commission has had the opportunity to accept it or ask you for more information or reject it, and then you have the opportunity to say you will accept what the commission would like changed. In the very, what I imagine would be very, very rare circumstance that didn't resolve, it says that if there is a disagreement still between the commission and the chief, that it would go to the mayor. And then it doesn't actually say what would happen there. But in my mind, as I read this, I thought that's where this charter change thing that they spent a lot of time on would come into play. Is that correct?
I think that is correct. I think that if that component of the charter change proposal were to be adopted, that's where it would go. So that's in 9, basically it comes in on 9, after 9E. So that would be on page 17, someplace after that. And that, again, the majority of section 9 is essentially the agreement from 2020. I think I certainly didn't, there's nothing in there that changes anything with meaning, but there are some things that just, the agreement itself is included as an appendix to look at. But the section of 9 is, section 9 is the agreement. And where the agreement currently ends is that. It ends with the sense that by charter, it is currently the chief's decision at the end what happens. And so there's a mechanism for, disagreement. Here's why our disagreement exists. Here's the chief's response to that disagreement, which either convinces or doesn't convince. And if the body remains unconvinced, the police commission remains unconvinced, it goes to the mayor. But under the current charter, it's true, the mayor cannot compel the chief to change that disciplinary determination. You know, so that is why the charter change recommendation does propose that body, that panel.
And I just wanted to
Yeah,
see if I was
and that's
reading
where
it
it would
correctly,
go.
because
Yep.
I think it's important to put this into perspective, why this rewritten DD 40 is so important, because it provides, I think, a lot of what people were hoping to gain through that process. And I think it's really important to consider them together in order to be able to understand the whole overview of what's currently happening. So I'm really pleased that people will be able to look at this. I was also really pleased about the part that you put in about transparency, because that had certainly been one of my concerns about how do we inform the public. So all these good things happen, a good process happens, and how does the public find out that the process has happened and what the result was? So I was very happy to see section G and section H on page 10. And I also wanted to make sure and wondered if you could talk just a bit about those two provisions, Chief.
Sure.
Because I want to make sure I understand them thoroughly. And if what I understood was from the statistical summary was basically something you would be giving to like the commission, and that would include even a very low level like supervisory review. And then the part outlined in H was really the piece that I had been asking for in my comments, the public transparency, which is a 6-month report that would allow the public to just see some very basic details that
Yes.
what the complaint was, the basic nature of it, and then how it was resolved. So I just wondered if you could just talk briefly about those two things.
I absolutely can. So G is largely in DD 40 already. The description of that statistical summary is in DD 40 as it currently exists. It's just not something that we really, I don't think we do enough. We share it with you now rather than internally. So there is no statistical summary that's provided internally to for example, the training unit or not. The Deputy Chief of Administration, the Chief of Police, and the Deputy Chief of Operations are dialed into the entirety of the complaint list and have access to it, and do, if they notice something it needs to be addressed, they do. We have had, there are multiple disciplinary cases where, and you often are I think I've shared these with you, where it occasions messages and retraining immediately inside, where we remind everybody about what their obligations are because a complaint was made that did not, an allegation was made that there wasn't, that certain trainings weren't being followed. And we pretty much immediately take note of that. So we have been doing those things, but the creation of the statistical summary, not so much. We instead follow the chart, and you duplicate the chart to make certain that we're both on the same page. There's been at least one instance in my memory in which we'd forgotten an incident that came in and you had it because it came to all of us and we said, oops, you're right. We are missing, citizen complaint 22 of 2023. Whatever, I'm making that number up. I have my phone out because I was going to try to find, I had sent it to the chiefs and Shannon, which was the VSP version of their report.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask you about that because I was looking at this. The state police have a citizen advisory board, and on their page, you can click on the month and you can see a short report of anything that has come before them. And I thought it was a really useful model for us and for people to see that might be a good way for our police department to do that as well.
So the VSP, for example, here has, they have a total of the number of cases from January 1st, 2023 through June 30th, 2023. And this was released to the public on March 18th, 2024. And it consists of a background, says why they're doing it. It consists of some notes on terminology, internally generated complaint made by a coworker or an employee of the department, the VSP, the Vermont State Police. Externally generated indicates a complaint was made by someone outside the department. It talks about the sort of where those cases go and that they're reported to the Vermont Criminal Justice Council. Certain ones are. And then it gives a statistical total. Internally generated cases, total 13. How many were founded, that is, found to have happened? 11. Unfounded? 1. Other? 1. Externally generated cases, there were 5. How many were founded? 0. How many were unfounded? 2. How many were other? 3. Now, this says to me, although it doesn't say it in here specifically, that they are only talking about what we would call either internal affairs or maybe administrative reviews. They are not talking about supervisor reviews. There's no way a 300-plus person agency that's dealing with people around the entire state only has 11 incidents or 13 incidents of, or actually, I'm sorry, externally generated cases is 5, only has 5 instances in which somebody wrote and said, Trooper Jones was not nice to me on my vehicle stop. Now that to us would be a supervisor review initially. And if upon reviewing it with other parties and you as well, we said, look, we watched it and Trooper Jones didn't do anything wrong, we're not turning that into an internal investigation. They must get more than 5 of those kinds of cases. I just don't believe they could not. And therefore, I think this is 5 true internal affairs levels cases. And that we could easily do as well. So here's an example of one externally. Here's one of those externally generated cases. This is the totality of the data they provide on it. 1, externally generated, January 2023. Synopsis. Inquiry into an allegation that a trooper participated in an off-duty physical altercation. Outcome: the member resigned before the completed investigation could be reviewed and adjudicated by the Commissioner of the Department of Public Safety. That's the totality of it. Now, we could meet that level of transparency easily and provide that for you and for the public. And if that becomes a part of this rule, we would. That would be an additional piece to it. We've already done it once. There is an existing version of the spreadsheet with which we share, that we share with you. There is an anonymized public version of it that was shared in 2020 during the early stages of what later became the charter change proposal. So it was sort of proposed by, I believe, then City Councilor Freeman, and it was under discussion not by the charter change and ordinance committees, but instead by the, I want to say it was the Public Safety Committee and perhaps the Police Commission acting as a joint committee. But nevertheless, then City Attorney Eileen Blackwood presented a lot of material on how citizen oversight worked in other places, and we, as a part of that, made a public release of not just the BIA level stuff, but everything, up to about 2020, I think. So it included 2018, 2019, and 2020. And so something like this, what the VSP does, is something that we would be willing to explore. We'd obviously have to work it out we'd talk with the BPOA and you, but that's an example of probably one of the things that, I'll admit, that is an add-in that is not, the vast majority of this, and I hope I've been clear that I didn't say that I didn't add anything. I said I tried my best to just say what we're currently doing. But that one would be an example of something that's new and would be something that they therefore would definitely want to weigh in on.
Yeah, and I think that level of detail is appropriate. I don't think it needs to be the kind of detail that, for instance, is in your use of force reports. It doesn't need to get to the full incident. I think, personally speaking, I think that would be sufficient. The idea is for the public to see that when a complaint is made, that there is a process and what the outcome of the process is. I think that helps with building, trust by having that kind of transparency, because you're already doing this work. You're already doing this good work, and I don't think that the public a lot of times realizes it's happening.
If I remember, I'm sorry, I just had, and maybe Commissioner Keefe can sort of remind me of that. There was a discussion at some point on the commission that BPD and the commission worked together to create some kind of a document, which would also be the Burlington Police Commission report, to sort of say what are the complaints, sort of give a blueprint of what we had received. And it didn't happen last year because we just don't have the resources and the time from all of us to create that. So I wonder if it's a discussion also for us to have, in moving forward, if we want to let BPD do that, keep track of those complaints and we review them, rather than us produce a report entirely, again, sort of basically duplicating their work until we have actually, sort of support staff and everything. I mean, that's something I'm just thinking out loud for other people to weigh in.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I had just a couple more quick comments on the DD40. I didn't see anything in there, Chief, about, and just tell me if this is something you thought about and doesn't fit, but having another police agency asked to step in and conduct an investigation. You know how you were talking about how you didn't have your own internal affairs bureau, and I wondered if that was a practice that BPD currently did sometimes, and whether that would fit somewhere in this policy.
I think it does mention it in the policy, and let me see if I can find that section. It does talk about, it talks about the idea of things being able to refer, that nothing here shall prevent officers or employees from referring things to entities outside the department if they believe that the issue, here, other reporting venues. Nothing described herein shall prevent an employee from reporting criminality to an appropriate law enforcement entity other than the BPD, such as the Vermont State Police, the Office of the Chittenden County State's Attorney, the Office of the Vermont Attorney General, the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Vermont, or federal law enforcement agencies such as the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So that allows employee allegations to be made elsewhere. I mean, they already can do so, but that makes it very explicit. And then with regard to the idea of moving cases to those entities, it talks about, let's see, it says something about instances in which there is a crime suspected and how that review will take place and when. Review or investigation. So this is, it is 2F, and it is on page 6 at the top. And it's F1. Upon reviewing, so in F, it says upon receiving an online complaint, a written citizen's complaint, and here I would add, I've made some additions to this. I've been looking at it since I sent it to you, but I would add here a complaint from the mayor's office, city council, or police commission, or a supervisor's notification of an internal complaint. The chief of police will determine whether a supervisor review, an administrative review, or an internal investigation is appropriate. The chief of police will forward all relevant information to the deputy chief of administration, who will assign a supervisor to conduct the appropriate review or investigation. And then one underneath it says, if a complaint appears to involve possible criminal conduct, and I would actually just rephrase that to say, if the review determines that a complaint may involve possible criminal conduct, comma, the chief of police will refer it to the Vermont State Police for investigation and or consult with the Chittenden County State's Attorney's Office to determine appropriate next steps. So it does have that in there right now. I've tweaked the language a little bit that is in this version, not in this version, but like you can see there's blue notes on this. I've been making notes and adding things to it. I think that part of what we could discuss right now is how you want me to proceed with that. If I have additional things that tweaks that I've added, do you want me to start doing them in track changes? I started a document using DD40 as it exists and making it track changes, and the entire thing was a track change because this is 30 pages instead of 7. So it would have been a big old sloppy mess. And myself, I find track changes sometimes to be very difficult to use and problematic. That said, there's a reason that we use them, and they're very effective as well. So I think what I would propose now is that if this is acceptable to you in the sense of we're happy that you've done this, and we can't, and by any means say that we're approving it, but we are, we would like to continue moving forward with this, that I would then say, okay, well, this is our new baseline, our foundation. I'll start tracking changes from there and provide you with versions that track changes, and for that matter, with the BPOA and others, to say that, so we can, moving from this point, say, here's how we're changing it, editing it. And that would be sort of a suggestion.
I would wholeheartedly accept that suggestion. I think it's a great suggestion. We can certainly move forward with that. I'm not hearing anything from any other commissioners about that. I think we'll have to revisit it at least once during our April meeting to get to some consensus. Go ahead, Commissioner Keefe.
No, it's just, I agree. I would call this the zero draft, and going forward, all track changes.
Perfect.
Yeah, I don't have any opinion on the track changes, but and I just wondered, Chief, is that consistent with what other departments in the region do? Like, I'm thinking from a public standpoint, let's say for some reason somebody makes a complaint against your deputy chief, and somebody in the public feels that it's not going to be fairly investigated if it's investigated by somebody employed by BPD.
I see.
And so I'm not necessarily saying this is conduct that would rise to a criminal level investigation, but in terms of the public feeling that in the appropriate circumstance, you might reach out to another municipality or the state police and ask them to conduct whatever sort of internal investigation you thought was necessary.
Yeah, I see now the difference that you're speaking of. Yeah. So obviously, if there's going to be a criminal level of that's an easier call. That's a pretty bright line. A criminal investigation, we generally don't do criminal investigations into our own employees unless it comes from an internal investigation that we're conducting, and then we would then pass that off if criminality were determined. And I think you've all been privy to, for example, a case where there was some evidence there that could potentially be, and we referred that to local state's attorney to say, do you think? And the response was no, and we took it back. What you're describing is, for certain levels of employee, and it really would be the deputy chiefs or others, would we do that? I myself would not. I myself wouldn't at this stage. I myself would say that no. If it's like the subordinates are I will discipline subordinates as the chief of police in the same way that I would discipline anybody else in the department, and not farm that out. Obviously, if the complaint is about me, there's a provision now for that. And that is included in this. It includes, what happens, and it goes to, it goes to the VCJC.
And in practice, there's a case that went to another jurisdiction as well. It's pending.
Yes, there was, yes. I don't think that ever, I think it ultimately was kicked back to this place and said, we're not to do, if I'm thinking of the same one, we'd have to talk about an executive. Yes, so so for me, or not me, but for the chief of police, there's a mechanism. For anybody beneath the chief of police, I myself would not send that to another entity. A different chief of police might. So, should that be something that's written in? That would be something we can talk about and debate, and if you all decide yes, that goes in there, then that's what we would do.
I was just asking because I wanted to understand it, and for me, it would matter whether that was done in other departments. And if it were not, if that's not the way other departments are set up, then I certainly am not advocating that.
A lot of other departments don't have internal investigations at all. The smaller departments, some small departments in the state don't even really have true investigators. And so there has recently been some efforts by VACOP, which stands for the Vermont Association of Chiefs of Police, but VACOP has set up some sort of volunteer programs where agencies in certain regions agree to, if you have a thing, you'll send it, and we'll sort of, what they've almost done is create little koozies so koozie is the Chittenden Unit for Special Investigations here in Chittenden County. It consists of detectives from a number of different entities. We contribute 2 detectives and the supervisor who oversees koozie. There's also a detective from Colchester and one from South Burlington and one there used to be one from UVMPD. I don't know if there currently is. They all take on really serious sex cases, sex assault, crimes against the very young, against the elderly. The reason I'm using them as an example is that they are their own entity. They're full-time in that entity because there are enough case volumes. What VACOP has tried to set up is something where it's not full-time, but you're on call as a detective from Agency X, and you hear that Agency Y has a case, and you sort of fly in as a visiting IAB detective or Internal Affairs Bureau detective, and you take on that case. And then ultimately it then goes back, however, to the chief of that department, or perhaps to the town manager, because in some instances, town managers and city managers not being elected have the final say rather than the chief of police. And that's how that would work. But they don't have the investigatory capacity, so they farm the investigatory responsibility out to a sort of rotating on-call group. We don't have that need. I mean, we have the ability to conduct the investigation internally, and I believe we have the integrity to see it through internally as well. But if that's not the consensus, then, we could, visit creating a new section in this that says that.
All right, I'm just looking at the time.
Yeah, I'm sorry if I've gone on.
Almost 8 o'clock, and I don't want to have we also have an executive session, and I don't want to be here till 11 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I know that Detective Coro is here, and there is something in the agenda that he's here to address, and we would like to hear from him about that, so I want to move on. The next item is commissioner comments, and I reintroduced this section in our agenda for commissioners to speak to the public about matters of important to them. I'll go first. And I know Commissioner Hanson also has something to say. First, I want to congratulate the mayor-elect Emma Mulvaney Stanek on being elected and look forward to working with her. I will be present at the swearing-in ceremony for her and a host of new and re-elected city councilors at the April 1st ceremony here at Contois at 6 p.m. And I hope other commissioners will join me. I also hope that the mayor-elect will make a commitment to direct resources to the police commission in the form of a part-time support staff. While I appreciate the exemplary work that Shannon Trammell, I hope I'm saying her last name right, has done, it is added work for her and beyond her full-time commitment to BPD. It is also important that the commission has someone who can keep us connected to the public and vice versa on a regular basis. This requires management of files, onboarding of new commissioners, managing our website, none of which has been done since we lost our support staff in October 2023. In fact, we lost our support staff in August 2023. So it really has been Shannon who has done most of the work. And in fact, I think Chief has ended up doing some of the clerical work along with me. So I think that we hope that'll change. And hopefully we'll meet with the new mayor-elect and request more resources. Commissioner Hanson.
Yes, I just wanted to mention and congratulate the new mayor-elect as well. And I would urge the new mayor-elect that if there is any questions about the performance of our current police chief, that she reach out to the police commission. I am concerned that our chief's contract, I know, comes up in June, and I feel like it's really important for the stability of the police department to have continuity. And so I do hope that we can avoid having our police chief become a political hot topic. And I hope that if the mayor-elect has questions, I just urge her to think about the stability of the department and to reach out to the police commission if we can be of any help in. I feel like we have the closest view of the chief and his performance of his work, and I do hope that we can continue with the great work that's happening and provide some stability for our police department.
Thank you. Anyone else has any comments? Commissioner Garrison, Commissioner Cox? Okay. Item 6 is commission business. 6.1 is review of February 2024 use of force reports. I don't know if people have had a chance to go over all the summaries and have any requests for viewing any of those use of force videos. I know there are some pending from January 2024, request pending from January 2024 meeting. I know Commissioner Keefe had requested a few viewing of a few body-worn camera footage, and I think sorry, go ahead.
Just,
what are you going to say?
I feel a sense of deja vu. We were here last month. Could you please give us an update on the policy? Because that was what prevented the videos from being released. So where are we, if you'd be so kind?
Commissioner Oski, you want to respond to that, or do you want me to go ahead and sort of give an update? Okay, all right. Yes, I do have an update. Commissioner Oski and I forwarded the updated policy approved following our February meeting to BPOA, and we are awaiting a response from them. And I hope BPOA will accept the current version since the commission has agreed to the parameters suggested by them. I hope to have the policy ready for vote and approval for the April meeting. That's where we are. Meanwhile, I had contacted City Attorney Haley McClanahan, and in fact, Chief Murad was CC'd on that, and you actually asked a follow-up question, and essentially it was told to both of us that BPD can release the request that you had made in January for, I believe it was 3 cases, 3 incidents to us, until we agree on a policy with BPOA. Okay, so there's nothing stopping DC LaBarge from releasing that information to us. That's
Yes.
the feeling I got.
That was the city attorney's ruling, and so we'll get those.
Right, and those are, I believe there are 3 incidents that.
Yeah, and if we don't still have them on record, DC LaBarge and/or DC LeBrecq will be in touch with you, Commissioner Keefe, to remind which ones.
Okay, great. Thank you for the update and work on those videos. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So I think, do people have any questions about the, any of the use of force summaries? I do not, and I'm not seeing any comments from Commissioner Cox either, so looks like people do not have any requests either. Okay. 6.3, Commission comment to the Charter Change Committee. I circulated a 2-page document collating all the comments made by various commissioners, and Shannon uploaded them on the Civic Clerk. There are many points of agreement and some differences. So as per the process approved at the Commission January meeting, we would like to hear from BPOA, followed by comments from the public. Detective Coro? Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Commissioners. Saying first, from what you're just speaking about, you'll be receiving a response from us related to the policy, hopefully within the week. So you'll be receiving a response from us within the week about that policy. I just have your comments in front of me, and I'm just going to kind of walk through them and give you my feedback on the ones that apply. The first one, retaining Commission's appellate authority. I don't really think we have much to say on this. You already know our stance on that happening. I think we're in agreement on that. As it relates to use of a complaints monitor to help Commission, we agree that you should have that. You should have somebody that should be doing that. From there, the independent panel, we've spoken about this at length with you, but I will say once again, now that we have DD40 that's at least in a draft form, a new draft form, and I think it's much easier to see what is being done in one place, whereas before that was very difficult, and the transparency wasn't really there. It was hard to tell what was being done or what wasn't being done. I think I would like to hear both the committee and the Commission's stance as they get through that 30 pages, and I'd like to have the conversation about the independent panel more after that, kind of get into that deeper. Our stance in the independent panel is still that it should be 5, not 3. I know the contention before has been it'd be very difficult to get 5 people. You need 5. 3 is too little, and I think 5 gives you a bigger base of experience and a bigger base of ability to have that conversation that's going to be needed. I think we are on the right track when it comes to the experience level that's needed. It's going to need to be somewhat deeper than just 10 years of law enforcement experience. There needs to be more in the background of that. What does that law enforcement experience look like? What are the parameters behind that law enforcement experience? Because 10 years of law enforcement experience is a good start, but we all know that, well, we know, and I'm sure you do too, and you've seen it in different places that you've been and people you've interacted with. 10 years of law enforcement experience in a town of 500 or 1,000 people compared to a town of 40,000, 100,000, 300,000 is very different. The calls of service that are responded to are very different. So that 10 years of law enforcement experience can vary substantially. So I think there needs to be a few more parameters when it comes to that. But I think that's on the right track. Going back to, I like this, the adage, if it's not broke, don't fix it. It's interesting that that's put in here, that was a quote made, Commissioner Keefe. I like that because when I look at DD40 that has been revised, if it isn't broke, don't fix it. That's where the BPOA stands right now. Let's be clear about that. We're happy to talk about the charter change. We understand that it's important, and we believe in fair and equal representation, and we believe in consistent representation for our members. The thing here is we think the process works very well as is currently. And as I've said before, and I'll continue to say, my biggest worry here, and our biggest worry as a body, is lengthening a process which puts more stress on officers, I think I've already given the example of officers in the past who have physically been ill in the amount of time that it took for a process to finish, either that be an internal investigation, as well as all the things that go through your head. Officers that do this job, members that do this job, we don't do this, it's not just a job to us, we're called to do this. There's a lot of other choices in the world right now. There's a lot of other options for careers. We all know that. You're taking on a lot of liability, you're taking on a lot of stress, and they continue to come and do this job every day. I'm not interested in making their lives harder than they already are when it comes to stress. And that is my big thing here. Having been through it myself, having spent years going through the process, continuing to go through the process currently with the civil litigation. I'm 6 years into civil litigation. I went through an internal investigation. I've been witnesses to other internal investigations, and I am constantly a part of internal investigations as the BPOA president with officers. I see how stressful it is for them. I'm the one trying to calm them down most of the time when their biggest fear is that they may not have a job tomorrow, whether that's completely out in left field. But that is your biggest worry at that point in time, is that you will no longer have your career. And they do care about, how they are viewed at the end of that as well. Their reputation matters to them, how they are viewed from the public matters to them. All these things matter. And it's very stressful when you're going through that, especially when it becomes publicized. And I'm getting off on a little bit of a tangent, but I just want to hit on this real quickly. When your name hits the news for something along those lines, and you have family members or friends calling you from across the country, asking why is your name in the news for this thing, that stresses you out. When you see your name on a sign, that stresses you out. Those things all stress you out. But let's go back to just the internal investigation itself. That's a very stressful time. The longer that we push out an internal investigation, the more stress is on that officer, the more services they're going to need. And we may take an officer completely out of their job completely at that time. They might not be able to do their function at that time due to the internal investigation. So what I'm getting at with that is, if it's not broke, don't fix it. That's the big one for me. DD40, the new DD40 lays it out pretty well of all the things we can do. But as we talk about going forward with this, the next thing that I'm going to talk about specifically is Councilor Travers. Once again, this quote comes from you, Commissioner Keefe, and from him. Liken the authority of the Commission's authority to conduct investigations into break glass in case of emergency. That I completely understand. We've all said, there can be situations where you need that extra level so that we can be certain when we're done that it has been investigated correctly and everybody is on the same page with that. What will the parameters be for that, though? Can we just break that glass at any point in time? What is the parameters to break that glass? I think that's something that would need to be broken down a little bit, because as I've said before, your commission may not break that glass a lot, but a commission in the future and a commission before you would have broken that glass every single time an incident arose. It would have been, nope, we need an independent investigation. We need an independent investigation, continually over and over and over and over. That's what I'm afraid of, and that's what I don't want to see. Because then it's going to turn into, okay, well, if I get into an internal investigation, that means that I will most likely, I'm looking at, 6 months for the investigation, but then you add in this extra part, which is 6 months more. I don't know. I don't know the exact time frame because I don't know what it is. And at that point, then you're looking at the retention issue of, does this officer want to deal with that by working here? So what do people do when they decide to work at a police department or anywhere for that matter? If it's a public or company that's more public, and for us, it's city government, so it's very public, they're going to Google it, right? That's the first thing I would do if I was going to a new job. I'm going to Google it. And if the first thing I see at the top is this, which is what's being talked about right now, and I see that there's this added layer that I have to now go through, I'm just going to say, well, I can go to South Burlington Police Department. They don't have this added layer, and I don't have to worry about that. I have less stress. I can go there. I can do my job. I can go home. That's going to be that. So it's just something to consider as we go forward when we're talking about timelines and parameters and really making it clear what those are going to be. Yeah, so I would say we are very understanding of the fact that there needs to be that ability. It's the same with the fact that we have the ability to appeal and arbitrate. It's the same reason we have the ability to come to you and say, we don't agree with this discipline, we would like you to look at it, and then if we can't come to agreement there, we move past that to arbitration. I think that's a similar concept of what I'm seeing here and how I understand it. I'm not going to speak on the council and all that. You talked about that in great detail, and I think it makes sense to have that somewhere where it's very clear, DD40, and if you have this separately, laying out that that needs to happen. This was a great point raised, I thought, by Commissioner Keefe. Purpose and effect of the provision that higher level complaints may not be disposed until the commission is notified of the proposed disposition is not apparent. Does this mean the chief's disposition is not final unless the commission agrees? I would like some clarification on this too. I think we would like some clarification on what this means. Where does the buck stop, basically? That's what we want to know. Sorry, I've read these like 4 or 5 times. I'm just trying to make sure I'm following. Go ahead.
I'm going to start, I took some notes, though I think, kind of try to understand this. So it seems like there are 2 lines of thinking here. One is you're concerned about the time.
Yes.
Right, that seems to be like your biggest concern, is
Yes.
that we have to, or at least in our recommendations to the Joint Committee, that we should, that's what we need to stress on the most. Stress reduction time frame
Yes.
for officers, that's what you are concerned with. Is
Yes.
the second part that I'm not exactly clear about. Are you saying investigating as in, are you asking that we need to have some language, or the Joint Committee needs to have some language about the parameters of the investigation? Like, what is the what are the conditions in which an investigation would happen?
Yeah, it's more, when is the independent panel what parameters causes us to add the
What would
independent?
trigger it?
Yeah, what triggers that? Because that's where I'm lost. Because
Okay.
the worry that I would have is, once again, a commission chooses to trigger this every time because they don't agree with a piece of, or they don't agree with the chief's decision every time. We've seen in the past where there was some anti-police bias on the commission and in the council, and when we saw that, there was pushback on everything at that time period. And that was very frustrating and very disheartening to us. So we would just like there to be parameters so that if that point comes where the commission shifts again and there is some frustration and there's contention, at least we have clear parameters of how we'll proceed forward. And I think that's easy once we sit down and actually talk about it, but it needs to happen. It can't just be, we have this panel, use them at your whim. Whenever you decide, see fit. You have to meet some type of parameters to use that. You talk about Commissioner Hansen, the commission, the charter change speaks to the need for the commission to be non-political. I think we can all agree that that's important. And when I say non-political, as I said, and I know some people don't like when we bring up the past, but the past is very important to us. It's very important. It's how we move forward. In the past, we've seen where it was political and it was very charged in anti-police. It was very much like a police bias that we saw over and over and over. And I'm hoping we don't see that going forward in the future at any point in time. All the BPOA is looking for is people to be reasonable and to think things out before they make a decision and not go into it with an immediate bias of, as we've seen in the past, this police officer did something wrong. We just would ask for that benefit of the doubt of taking and looking at the whole collective situation. As you put into the policy, totality of the circumstances. That's what's important. The other policy. I just talked about at length the timeline for when the process will be resolved, so I'm not going to harp on that. And then once again, I will say again, though, we suggest 5. I still suggest 5. The BPOA suggests 5 people for this. And I think the amount of time for both the HR representative and the law enforcement officers is the right amount of time with some parameters behind that. And then Commissioner Cox, I have nothing against her statements at all, your statements at all. When it comes to having somebody on the panel that has professional experience in diversity, equity, inclusion work, mental health policy, or direct services. I think that fits on a 5-person panel with at least two people with law enforcement experience, 1 person with that experience, and HR experience. My thought would be on the 5th would be somebody who is experienced in labor law. So experience in labor law. That would be my thought for the 5th person. I think that pretty much hits everything. I didn't want to take up a ton of your time. I'm interested to see kind of what comes out of this going forward.
Well, thank you very much. And if I may, I signaled before, I think there's some existential questions. And one that I have, and it didn't make it into the 2-page summary. I sent a document early January to, I think, everyone in this room. For me, what I was hoping for, that we would get clarity, is this independent panel.
Yes.
What does it actually do? What is its powers? What are its duties, roles, obligations? So when the mayor approved the City Council Resolution 7.09 in November of 2021, the issue that they wanted to address was, and I quote, "the question of moving disciplinary authority from the chief of police to a body that is independent from the Burlington Police Department." This panel that is being proposed, I have no idea what it is. It doesn't say anything about that. So in my mind, if we're going to talk about, we vote on 2/3 to send it to a panel, it says nothing to me. I don't really know what that means. I don't know what the role of the commission is. And so I would at some point like to hear from, and maybe we need now for the new counselors to come on board, is there intent to establish a panel, independent panel, that is taking ultimate disciplinary authority or not? Because that really, everything else kind of hinges on that, frankly. So, I don't know what the position is maybe from the BPOA. I mean, it's pretty clear that it's not going to be the commission.
Yes.
The commission is volunteers, citizens doing really a watchdog function. We have advisory, role. We can suggest things. So this idea that there's a disagreement, somehow we're litigating. And I do take your point. I really agree. I feel what the commission needs to be is just a purely objective and independent body.
Yes.
It should be neither anti or pro-police.
Exactly.
We're just looking at the facts.
Yes.
And I would actually say to Commissioner Hanson, around the chief's appointment, the commission took a position. We're not weighing in on that. That is a political issue. It's also human rights, HR, human resources. And we didn't take a position. So I really I would disagree with that statement that the mayor-elect should come and talk to us. I mean, we're independent, we're objective. I think that's what we should be. And in terms of what this, so this idea of framing it that we're in litigating with the chief, we're in disagreement, and we're going to kick it up to a panel, I don't really understand that. So I would welcome your thoughts on what this panel is and what is it that we're trying to do with this charter change, because I don't understand.
The BPOA from the beginning has been clear that we don't fully understand what the intent of the independent panel is either. We don't see a need for the independent panel. The only thing that we have somewhat understood, or we believe we understand, is the independent panel being somewhat of like an ability to appeal and arbitrate, that if you didn't agree with the chief's decision, you could push it to this panel to reinvestigate. That's how I'm interpreting it, and that's how we have, as the BPOA, have interpreted it as well. We don't see a need for it. And to go on to the next point, the independent panel itself should not be the end-all be-all, should not be the final decision maker. That doesn't make sense to us. And that's the same with the fact that we don't agree, and we wholeheartedly are against the mayor having any say in discipline as well when it comes to the police department and the police officers out of the police department. We understand that is the case for the chief of police, and that makes sense to us. That is the mayor's sole ability in that situation. the rest of the department should be managed and dealt with by the department head. And the Burlington Police Department and the police departments in general around the country are very different from the rest of the public works and all the other departments. And that has been, and it's very clear in charter why that is the case. And that will continue to be the case, hopefully. It's very clear why that is the case. And to say, well, the other department heads are at, you know, all their employees are at the whim of the mayor, that's like apples to oranges in my point of view. And I think that's kind of getting lost here a little bit. So I'm hoping that's continues to remain clear. I would ask that if that is continued to be pushed by the committee, that they show me other police departments around the country where that is the case, where the mayor has say in who the chief, you know, during disciplinary outcomes, if the mayor is involved in those disciplinary outcomes.
I just want to read a text from Commissioner Cox. She essentially says that according to her, the mayor referral doesn't work. And she says Commissioner Keefe has been saying that so many times. Can you say my thought? That's her thoughts. Is that then it would be the independent panel, not the mayor, who we refer disagreements to. Is that correct? I think is that our understanding? I think she's asking a question. It is the independent panel, not the mayor, who we refer disagreements to.
Right.
I think that would be.
Based on the draft charter change.
On the draft charter change, yes. Yes, Commissioner Cox.
And the question is, to what purpose?
Yes.
To what purpose? Yes, that is the question. So. Okay, thank you. Unless people have some other questions for Detective Coro, he has been very patient for 3 hours now listening to us. But thank you for your input. We will take notes as we refurbish this document before it's sent over to the joint committee. Today, we also would like to hear from comments from the public, but I don't know if there's anybody, I don't know if even, thank you, sir. Come ahead, go ahead.
Thank you, commissioners. I'm actually going to step out, so have a great night.
Okay, yes, thank you, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Chair, for granting me again to speak. So I'm glad that there's this part of the public engagement regarding what was just discussed. And as a private citizen hearing from my perspective, I remain a little bit concerned, if not very concerned to a certain degree, not having a proper accountability for any department within public service. The police department, the fire department, any department within city government has to have some sort of accountability or an oversight to make sure whether it's directly from the, say, department heads report to the mayor, the commission, as I do understand the police commission, though not necessarily an oversight body, but rather a department or rather commission that gives their suggestions to what they're thinking, what's going on with respect to the department. But I would love to see the panel that is being put together to have much more meaning, and if that's not the case, to leave that responsibility to the commission. I'm a little bit concerned having almost two separate public oversight over the police department, and on top of that, you have the mayor as well. So, though I do welcome BPOA's, response to you, I think the police department is no different than any other department. Yes, they do have specific responsibilities to the public when it comes to public safety, but I think the department needs to be held responsible just as any other department would be with respect to the commission that is, responsible overseeing the activities and how things are done and so on and so forth. So listening to BPOA and some of the input that he just gave you, the gentleman, I would have loved to see much more welcoming input, that says, I almost felt like, that it's up to almost BPO to make the decision how you guys should view it, their work, versus, you guys making the decisions of what needs to be done when it comes to taking care of complaints. Another thing that I've noted is that I haven't heard anything pertaining to what the complaints entail, such as equity-based complaints, or Title VI, I believe that's what that is, as well as ADA complaints. If an officer does not comply with those specific issues, like they're responding to an issue, say, or the level of interaction they have, say, with somebody who has a disability or somebody of, a person of color or migrant, so on and so forth, and there's some Title VI issues that have not been observed, and a complaint was submitted within those lines, I haven't seen the, and you could correct me, I could very well be wrong in that regard. I haven't seen the DDA 40, how that it addresses within that complaint, whether it's the specific officer or the chief or anybody underlying within that department, how that is addressed through that DDA 40 when it comes to complaint, and not just complaint broadly speaking, but specific complaints pertaining to that specifically. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and I'm sorry, I did not realize that you were speaking as part of this discussion. I thought you were just observing, so that's why I hesitated for a moment, but thank you for your comments. As per the process approved at the Commission January meeting, we will continue to deliberate at the April 23rd Police Commission meeting, and commissioners will vote on any proposal if needed. We can also choose to send the list of changes and/or suggestions to the Joint Committee of City Council after listening to the public and BPOA today. That pretty much concludes our public part of our meeting today. Is there a motion regarding special findings?
Do we need an executive session?
I do have something to inform you.
Okay, can you give me an idea of what it relates to so that we can know what kind of executive session we have to go into?
Personnel, both are personnel matters.
Okay, thanks. Yes, I move for a special finding that premature general public knowledge of the Commission's hearing of personnel matters would clearly place the state, municipality, or other public body or person involved at a substantial disadvantage.
Is there a second? Commissioner Keefe, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Is there a motion to move into executive session then?
I move that the commission enter executive session based upon that special finding pursuant to 1 VSA 313A1, say B. Yeah.
Is there a second?
I think Commissioner Garrison did.
Commissioner Garrison, any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Motion passes. The commission will move into executive session, and we will not return to a public session today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.
And the public thanks us
And the public
for
thanks us.
not coming back and keeping them longer.